Halloween or All Hallows Eve, marketing trick or harmless treat. From carving pumpkins to bobbing apples, the scariest day in the calendar is growing increasingly popular in South Africa. Investment analyst Chris Gilmore is here to tell us how much money we spend on Halloween. And joining us via Skype in Cape Town is Arch-Priest Martin Zeo Frost, who is a, well, witch and leader of the Notrenlim Phoenix Academy. Welcome, gentlemen. I'd ask you to shake my hand, but you're probably reluctant to do that.
Oh, yes.
There's lots of money in Halloween, isn't there?
Well, not nearly as much as there'd be in America or Britain or Europe. You know, there's not really a culture of celebrating Halloween in this country. You know, when I was a kid growing up in Scotland, you know, we actually used turnips rather than pumpkins, because pumpkins are more of an English thing. You'd hollow them out and you'd put a candle inside them and cut a face in it, and you go around doing what was called guising. And you'd knock on people's doors and you'd do a bit of singing or recite some poetry, and they'd give you money or maybe some cake and stuff like that. That kind of culture, I'm not aware of ever having really existed in South Africa. And maybe it's starting to gain a little bit of traction. You know, kids maybe doing weekend things. But the shops, you know, the retailers, do they really get an awful lot out of it? I don't think so.
Martin, maybe the shops don't get much out of it yet, but what do we get out of this, and what should we be getting out of it?
Well, the celebration of Halloween is actually a much older celebration that we as pagans celebrate as Samhain. And Samhain is a seasonal celebration. Therefore, even though we are seeing the influx of people celebrating it now in October in South Africa, we in fact should be celebrating it at the end of April, because Halloween marks the going into winter, and it is the time that we honor our ancestors.
Okay. Do you think we will finally get our timing right? Do you think we'll change it to the appropriate time, to the correct time?
Well, by pagans in South Africa, it is already celebrated in April. Whether the larger South African community will celebrate it in April as we as pagans do, I highly doubt it, because we see that South Africans, or the whole world really, emulates what America has popularized. And I'm by no means saying that America made Halloween, but clearly the over-the-top feel of Halloween was popularized by America, and we, for some reason, emulate what they do.
And how do you think they managed to make it that popular? What is it that they've given it to it? And do you think there's a commercial side to it that often drives this?
There's definitely a commercial side to it. But if you go back to like the 9th century AD, then you will find that the church in that day made the All Souls Day from May to November end of October, beginning of November for them. And so it became the popularization of a pagan holiday, but now as a non-pagan thing for kids to enjoy, really.
If we look at the commercialization of anything, I mean, you can see why something like this would catch on. You know, you've got the freaky hands and, you know, all the bits and bobs, and when there are props, there's money.
No, absolutely. And look, the Americans, as he says, have commercialized this, you know, with movies and all sorts of things. I mean, they don't even refer to it as Halloween. I think they call it Halloween. They have to be different. But in terms of the commercialization of it, you know, it's a bit like Valentine's Day, for example. It's very specific stuff. It's not like Christmas, which is really across the board. It's not like Black Friday, which is gaining traction at the end of November, which again is across the board. It's very specific things, you know, these rather ghoulish type of representations. So yes, it's there, and it's there for a relatively short period of time, one day basically, and maybe a little bit of lead up in a few days. But yes, it may be gaining a bit of traction, and I think, you know, you do have to distinguish between what people are doing in terms of emulating what the Druids did, you know, hundreds and thousands of years ago, and what is really just a bit of fun from an American perspective.
It's fun, but pretty scary as well sometimes. I mean, there were huge celebrations this week in Johannesburg and parts of Johannesburg. Martin, where does the ghoulish aspect come into Halloween, and how important is it to respect what it stands for?
Well, the fantastic thing about the ghoulish aspect of Halloween is it is the one night of the year where we as witches or pagans get to be normal. Everybody would like to emulate what we are like every day of the year. That's just a little joke.
Yeah, that's a good one.
But for example, the old figure of the hag, the witch with the crooked nose and the warts, it is a symbol of the crone, and the crone is an aspect of the triple goddess, which is a sign of reverence, you know. Kids dress up in these ghoulish outfits and carve the jack-o'-lanterns, and in fact, if you go back, those were ways that people used to protect themselves from the unwanted spirits that would venture, because on this night, as well as on Beltane, which is what we are celebrating, in fact, now in the Southern Hemisphere, the veil between the seen and the unseen is rather thin. So you would dress yourself up, you would have your jack-o'-lanterns as a way of protecting yourself from the spirits that would possibly be harmful should they cross the veil.
Chris, if this catches on, I mean, do you think that the drive for money can sometimes obscure what this is all about and push it into another area?
Oh, absolutely.
Another focus.
Yes, no, for sure. I mean, you only have to look at Christmas. The religious aspect of Christmas, for most people, is long gone.
It's shopping.
And it's purely, it's a commercial thing. I mean, if you look at the actual amount of sales that take place in the typical retailer, about 30 to 40% of the yearly sales is compressed into the week before Christmas. So it's a huge commercial thing. And yeah, to answer your question, I think this has the potential to be a lot bigger than it is, but I don't think it's ever going to be getting into the realms of Christmas or even Black Friday for that.
Why not? I mean, what can be done to push it there? I mean, if you're selling fantastic outfits, if you're setting up carnivals to celebrate it.
Yes, I take your point, and as you rightly say, you know, at the weekend there, I think, you know, you had a lot of kids particularly getting into the swing of things. I just find it's a bit too specific. You know, if it was across the board, if people were just splurging on just about everything, then yes, I think from the quantum of money spent, it could be it's probably going to be not that big.
Okay, so, you know, as you were saying, the focus has gone into shopping, which is some people's religion. Where's spirituality in all of this, Martin, or the spiritual side of things?
Well, currently, as we now see Halloween in the Southern Hemisphere being celebrated here and now in October, there's no spirituality to this celebration at all. Whereas if you go to the actual celebration of Samhain, it is one of the major celebration points for us as pagans. We have 8 celebration points throughout the year, and this is one where we honor and venerate our ancestors. And we don't celebrate it as a mourning, but rather like, if I would call it, a Mexican Dia de los Muertos, where we honor and praise and have fun. And remember the lives that they have lived. And from that regard, when we celebrate it at the end of April, it is an incredibly spiritual ceremony. But Halloween, as it is now, for us in the Southern Hemisphere in October, there's nothing spiritual about it. It's people getting together and having fun.
Okay, Martin, you're a witch. Tell us what that means.
I am a witch, yes. Not all pagans are witches, but all witches are pagan and vice versa. Basically, what that means is it's a spiritual path that adheres nature as being part of the divine, and the divine has both male and female aspects to it. Our Sabbaths, for example, we don't celebrate historical dates at all. We celebrate the earth as we find it on that day. And that is why Halloween is the marking of winter. Winter is coming now, and that is why we can't have Halloween technically in October.
Okay. And Chris, are you a little bit excited about it? Have you got a fetching little number under your suit that you're going to expose us to later?
No, unfortunately, Jane, not at all. I've never really taken it that serious. Other than when I was a kid, I used to quite enjoy it.
Okay. Martin Zeo Frost and Chris Gilmore, thank you very much. That's our show for tonight. News is next.